Senate will come back to order. Senator, on the 56th, if you'd like to remove House Bill 783, you are recognized this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask unanimous consent to remove House Bill 783 from the table.
Is there objection? Read the caption.
House Bill 783 by Representative Caldwell of the 20th and others, a bill will be titled an act to amend various titles of the OCGA so as to repeal provisions creating inactive boards, panels, authorities, centers, commissions, committee, councils, task force, and other such bodies, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Government Oversight offers the following substitute to HB 783, a bill will be titled an act to amend various titles of the OCGA so as to repeal provisions creating inactive boards, panels, authorities, centers, commissions, committees, councils, task force, and other such bodies for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Jackson of the Second offers the following amendment. Jackson II and others offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate Committee on Government Oversight substitute to HB 783 by inserting after line 3 the following: to amend Title 45 of the OCGA relating to public officers and employees so as to create the Georgia Commission on African American History and Culture and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 56.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I bring to you House Bill 783. House Bill 783 is really a bill to continue the legacy of someone who many of us remember here. Representative Calvin Hill was a representative from Hickory Flat in Cherokee County, good friend and excellent legislator who always had a passion to repeal out-of-date code out of the official code of Georgia annotated. And House Bill 783 does that just by simply removing and abolishing inactive boards, authorities, and councils. There's also an amendment on this bill, which I fully support, from the senator from the 2nd, which simply creates a commission on African American history and culture, which I know will be a great benefit to the state of Georgia. If there are no questions, I will yield the well.
No questions, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from the 2nd to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very simple amendment. We voted overwhelmingly to pass this commission in the Senate, and it creates an African American History and Cultural Commission. Thank you very much, Mr. President. If there be no questions, I yield the well.
Questions on amendment number 1. Is there objection? Without objection, amendment number 1 is adopted. Question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute as amended is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agreeing to report of committee which fail pass the bill. Chairs none, report of committees agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are the objections? Chairs none, main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Question on the pass of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 7th, if you'll stand by. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 43 and the nays are 0. This bill, MC Rex, constitutional majority is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes Senator from the 7th.
Oh, Mr. President, ask unanimous consent to remove House Bill 867 from the table.
867, read the caption.
Senate House Bill 867 by Representative Hitchens, 161st, and others. A bill will be titled enactment at Chapter 8, Title 35 of the OCGA relative to employment and training of peace officers, so as to revise the quorum for transaction of business by the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Is there objection? Without objection, the bill will be removed from the table. Chair recognizes Senator from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, House Bill 867 just does a number of revisions in regards to the post council per their request in regards to quorum and allowing their investigators retain badges and guns, and also removing requirement for an individual to have to wait 30 days if you fail the post exam. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I yield the well. I appreciate your favorable consideration. Vote green. Go green.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Read report of committee which failed pass the bill. All those in favor of the bill vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary unlock the machine. Senator from the 9th will stand by. 9th on the passage of the bill, the yeas are 47, the nays are 1. This bill having serious constitutional majority is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes Senator from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to pull HB 64 off the table.
Read the caption.
House Bill 64, President Blackman, 146, and others. The bill will be titled enactment Article 1 of Chapter 24, Title 33 of the OCGA relating to general insurance provisions so as to provide for the compensation of health insurance agents in certain situations and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Read the amendments.
Mr. President, Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to HB 64. Bill will be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 24 of the OCGA related to general insurance provisions so as to provide for the compensation of health insurance agents in certain situations for other purposes. Amendment 1 by Senators Schaefer of the 48th offers the following amendment. Amend the committee substitute to HB 64 by adding after the semicolon line 5 of page 1 the following to amend Code Section 3323.13 of the OCGA relating to temporary licenses so as to provide requirements for temporary licenses are limited to certain provisions for other purposes. Amendment 2 by Senator Martin of the 9th and others offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor substitute to HB 64 by deleting lines 28 through 30 and inserting in lieu thereof the following. Benefit plans sold during a special enrollment period. Nothing in this and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Is there objection? Without objection, the bill will be removed from the table. Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th present the bill and his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to present HB 64. And as the senator from the 25th said, can we please pass this bill? I hope that we can. HB 64, all it does is it says that if a health insurer has filed rates that include an agent commission, that they should pay that agent commission during open enrollment, The one amendment we put in there was some confusing language in there that talked about special enrollment periods. It removes that language and just remains silent when you're dealing with special enrollment periods. If there aren't any questions, I will yield the well. I do have, it seems like my bills seem to be the ones that get stuck with issues that haven't gone through the committee process, so I will oppose the First Amendment from the senator from the 48th.
I think he's going to withdraw it. Chair recognizes Senator from the 48th.
Mr. President, fearful of the drubbing I would receive from the opposition by the senator from the 9th, I'm asking unanimous consent to withdraw Amendment 1.
Senator has asked it unanimous consent as the objection. Without objection, the Amendment 1 will be withdrawn. Senator from the 25th, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, isn't it true the reason why I'd like to see this bill pass is because we've talked about it for 3 years in the Senate Insurance and Labor Committee?
I'm certain of that, Senator. Questions on Amendment number 2. Is there objection? Without objection, Amendment number 2 is adopted. Question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute as amended is adopted. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree and report of committee which fail will pass the bill. Chairs none. Report of committee is agreed to. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary unlock the machine. Let me get the Senate's attention. I think the governor just concluded speaking to the House, by which he is en route to the Senate. So if the senators would prepare themselves for the governor's arrival shortly. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50 and the nays are 0. This bill, MC Rex Constitution majority is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes Senator from the 54th.
President, I request unanimous consent to remove House Bill 189 from the table.
189, read the caption.
House Bill 189 by President Nelson, the 125th and others, a bill will be titled an act amend Chapter 80 of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to general provisions applicable to counties, municipal corporations, and other governmental entities, so as to provide that any service contract such entities enter into shall contain a termination clause and for other purposes. Mr. President, state and local government operations general offers the following substitute to HB 189, a bill will be titled an act amend Article 3, Chapter 82 of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to revenue bonds, so as to revise the definition of the term undertaking to provide for elections regarding revenue certificates relating to general and for other purposes. Mr. President.
Is there objection? Without objection, be removed from the table. Chair recognizes Senator from the 54th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm back again with a bill from Tuesday and ask for your favorable vote and consideration for this. It's House Bill 189. As I explained this past Tuesday, Dalton Utilities is a municipally owned utility. They provide gas, water, cable, and also electricity. And they already issue bonds. They don't have to come to this body to issue bonds for water, gas, or cable, but they do have to come to this body to issue bonds for electricity. And so this past January, Dalton Utilities was given the green light that they could move forward. So therefore, they reached it to the legislature on February. The city council passed by unanimous consent to allow the legislature to move forward in seeking this for the city of Dalton. There's no opposition at home, and this is something the city of Dalton is asking for, and so I'm here asking for the approval of House Bill 189 to allow the city of Dalton to issue revenue bonds for electricity. I yield the will.
Questions on the adoption of committee substitute? Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree on report of committee which failed to pass the bill. Chairs none. Report of committee is agreed to. All those in favor of the bill, vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary unlock the machine. The governor has arrived. Would ask that all senators please come in, take your seats, cease all audible conversation. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 31 and the nays are 13, and by the hair of his chinny chin chin, it does pass. Mr. Sergeant at Arms. Thank you, Mr. Sergeant at Arms. Please escort our great governor along with the First Lady to the rostrum at this time. This is a great, great honor to have the governor always on the 40th day. And every single one of you, I think, have had the opportunity to be involved in negotiations with this governor, and you have seen a person who has led with his heart. To think about the strong legacy that he is leaving behind after 8 years of service to our great state is remarkable. The benefits that he has had with our families across Georgia. When you think about economically that under his leadership, our economy has grown every month since he's taken office. It's not easy to do. Pretty remarkable. But not only that, he has also been able to be diligent in economic development, over 700,000 jobs. You think about the impact on individuals' lives as it pertains to the reform measures that he has ushered through with criminal justice, and how that has added to our productivity as a state. You name all of those things and you think, well, you really can't top that, but he actually topped it again this year by doing something very historic. One, fully funding QBE, which is remarkable. And he also helped lead the largest tax cut in Georgia's history as well. This is a man that will be viewed by history very, very well. And he will, obviously, whoever gets to follow in his footsteps will have big shoes to fill. But he is a wonderful, wonderful man and has a beautiful First Lady who has served us very, very well. Please join me in welcoming our great Governor, Nathan Deal.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that very kind introduction, and thank you all for having me here for the last time. Many of you have been with me the whole 8 years that I've had the honor of serving as governor. And we have worked through some big issues over that period of time, things that I think we can all be proud of. And as the Lieutenant Governor indicated to you, we are especially proud of what you have been able to do during this legislative session. For example, as he alluded to be able to fully fund QBE, really for the first time since its inception in 1985. Just think of how many General Assemblies have met during that 33 years and were never able to fully fund that formula. You are to be congratulated. Thank you for supporting that effort, and I'm just pleased that we got it done this year. Now, secondly, as he alluded to, the biggest tax cut in the history of our state. In fact, ever since our personal income tax was put in place in 1934, it had never been reduced until this session of the General Assembly. So, for those of you who supported that, and that was most of you, I simply say to you, thank you. You can be very proud of what you have done this session, and those who've been here for more than this session can be very proud of what has happened in each of the past 8 years. I thank you for your participation in following our leadership, in listening to us, and we hope that we have listened to you. That's the way we were able to get these things done, and I appreciate that. But most of all, I appreciate your personal kindness to me and to Sandra. That has meant a lot to both of us, and we won't forget that. So thank you again for having us tonight. I will see many of you over the next few months until the next session of the General Assembly, which will be my real exit at that point in time. But I wish you the very best over this vacation period. I know you got a lot of work to do because it is a campaign season. But if you can't get reelected on the things that we did this year, you probably don't need to be here in the first place. Thank you all.
Before the governor exits, we have prepared a resolution. If you would read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 1072 by Senator Mullis and 55 other senators, recognizing and commending Governor Nathan Deal and for other purposes. Whereas Nathan Deal was born on August 25, 1942 in Millen, Georgia, and whereas he married Sandra Dunnigan in 1966 and is the proud father of 4 children, Jason, Mary Emily, Carrie, and Katie. And whereas he received his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1964 and a law degree in 1966 from Mercer University, and served as a Judge Advocate General of the United States Army from 1966 until 1968 at Fort Gordon, whereas he spent 23 years in the private practice of law, serving as a criminal prosecutor, Hall County Juvenile Court Judge, and Superior Court Judge on the Northeastern Judicial Circuit before being elected to the Senate, the Georgia Senate, in 1980, where he served until 1993. And whereas he was elected to the United States House of Representatives from Georgia in 1992, where he served until 2010. And whereas the people of the great state of Georgia elected him to serve as the 82nd governor of the state of Georgia in 2010, and whereas he has led Georgia to become the #1 state in the nation for business for 5 consecutive years, has helped create more than 650,000 private sector jobs, and has worked with the Georgia General Assembly on the Transportation Funding Act of 2015, which included a number of significant infrastructure projects to alleviate traffic and improve safety. And whereas his tenure as governor of Georgia has saved millions of taxpayer dollars by maintaining a AAA bond rating, and whereas at the beginning of his tenure as Georgia governor, Georgia was in the midst of a criminal justice crisis with high incarceration costs and recidivism rates, which he addressed by working with the General Assembly to implement a series of bipartisan reforms that have already paid dividends by saving taxpayers $264 million. Whereas his criminal justice reforms include expanding access to accountable courts and give new beginnings to nonviolent offenders with addiction or mental health issues. And whereas Governor Deal believes that education reform is the best criminal justice reform, and as a result, he has dedicated more than 50% of state funds to education every year since he's been in office, devoting a higher percentage of the budget to K-12 funding than any governor in the past 50 years. Whereas his significant organizational and leadership talents, his remarkable patience and diplomacy, his keen sense of vision, and his sensitivity to the needs of the citizens of this state have earned him the respect and admiration of the citizens of Georgia and of his colleagues and associates. And whereas he is a person of magnanimous strengths and unimpeachable reputation for integrity, intelligence, fairness, and kindness. And whereas it is abundantly fitting and proper that the outstanding accomplishments of this remarkable and distinguished Georgian be appropriately recognized. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend the Honorable Nathan Deal, 82nd Governor of the state of Georgia, for his outstanding life of service to the citizens of this state and for his significant contributions to the lives of Georgians and his many accomplishments and achievements. That completes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? Chair is none. The resolution is adopted. As I was sitting here and listening to all of the things that were talked about in terms of this governor and the many, many years of service to Georgia citizens and all of the various accomplishments that he has had, it's a humbling experience to witness, but we all owe him, along with the First Lady, a huge debt of gratitude for their great service to our great state. Thank you, Governor. Senator from the 16th, you're recognized for your special order.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate disagree to the House amendment to the Senate amendment to House Bill 878.
Read the caption.
House Bill 878 by Representative Clark of the 147th and others. The bill will be titled Enactment Code Section 332444.1 of the OCGA relating to procedure for cancellation by an insured and notice so as to change certain provisions regarding cancellation of an insurance policy and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amend HB 878 by deleting lines 1 and 2, inserting in lieu thereof the following. Chapter 24, Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance generally so as to change certain provisions by inserting after insured on line 3 the following. To require health benefit plans to establish step therapy protocols, to provide for a step therapy exception process, to provide for statutory construction, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Is there objection? Without objection, the Senate will disagree to the House amendment to the Senate amendment. Senator from the 37th, you are recognized this time. HR 898 from the table.
Mr. President, I move that we unanimously consent to take House Resolution 898 off the table.
Is there, read the caption.
House Resolution 898 by Representative Coleman of the 97th and others, a resolution creating the Joint Study Committee on the establishment of a state accreditation process and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 37th. Present the bill.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I ask that you approve House Resolution 898. This provides for a study committee of accreditation of K-12 school districts. Currently, we only evaluate these districts based on their board relationships and board functions. We need to expand this to include a study of their financial efficiency and also academic proficiencies in their district, and this study committee hopefully will have a bill coming out from the recommendations coming out next year that would improve this process. I urge your approval of this. If there's no question, Mr. President, I yield the will.
No question, Senator. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the resolution? Is there objection? Agree and report to committee which favor passage of the bill. Chairs none. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlike the machine. On the pass of the resolution, the ayes are 46, nays are 0, and the resolution is adopted. Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd. 32nd.
Mr. President, I would move that House Bill 840 be removed from the table.
Read the caption.
House Bill 840 by Representative Hitchens, 161st, and others. Bill will be titled Enactment, Chapter 13, Title 48 of the OCGA, relating to specific business and occupation taxes so as to provide an exemption from penalties and interest in the event of military service in a combat zone and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes senator from the 30. Is there objection? Taking it off the table. Without objection, chair recognizes senator from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow Senators, I'm bringing you House Bill 840 that relates to military service in a combat zone. Many times we have troops that are deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and while they're gone, their business license will lapse, and they'll have to pay not only the license fee when they get home, but also the penalties. And what this law does is it gives them 60 days after they return from their deployment to pay the fees without being in default. I'd be happy to take any questions, and if there are none, I'll yield the well.
There are no questions. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is the objection agreed in the Report of Committee which fail will pass the bill? Chair is none. Report of Committee is agreed to. This main question be now put. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary unlock the machine. Senator from the 14th will stand by. On the pass of the bill, the yeas are 47, the nays are 0, and this bill having received its constitutional majority is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes senator from the 14th. No. Make the motion to bring it off the table.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to bring 214 from the table.
Read the caption.
House Bill 214 by Representative Golick of the 40th and others. The bill will be titled Enactment, Article 1 of Chapter 9, Title 16 of the OCGA, relating to forgery and related offenses so as to provide consistent punishment for the unlawful manufacture, sale, distribution of a proof of insurance document and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor Office following subject to HB 214, a bill will be titled Enactment, Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance so as to extensively revise Chapter 41 relating to captive insurance companies, provide for definitions, provide for sponsored captive insurance companies and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Is there objection? Without objection, the bill will be removed from the table. Chair recognizes senator from the 14th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be brief as Georgia continues to be a state that is bringing businesses and being fair. What this does is basically the move to continue to create captives for insurance companies. This does another category of sponsored captive to allow a medium to a large company to be able to participate. With that, Mr. President, I'll yield the well unless there's any questions.
No questions. Question on the adoption of the committee substitute is objection. Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. All of those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 0. And this bill having received a constitutional majority is therefore adopted. We're going to go ahead and move on a special order. Chair recognizes Senator from the 50th.
President, I move that the Senate adhere to its disagreement to the House amendment to Senate substitute to House Bill 992 and that a conference committee be appointed.
Conference committee being appointed, Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 992 by Representative Law of the 122nd others will be titled an act in Chapter 11, Title 31 of the CGA relating to emergency medical services. Those will eliminate certain requirements relating to the use of automated external defibrillators and for other purposes. That concludes the...
Is there objection? Without objection, the conference committee will consist of the senator from the 50th, the senator from the 56th, and the senator from the 11th, the gentleman from Bainbridge. We are now going to move on into some agrees. First up is going to be the senator from the 40th. You are recognized this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to HB 787.
Read the caption.
House Bill 787 by Representative Hilton of the 95th and others. The bill will be titled an act amendment Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education so as to revise certain provisions relative to charter schools and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate substitute to HB 787 by striking lines 1 through 620 and inserting in its place the following. To amend Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education so as to revise certain provisions relative to charter schools, provide that state charter schools may receive services from regional educational service agencies, to revise funding for state chartered special schools and state chartered schools and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes senator from the 40th. Speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the charter school and the needs-based aid legislation. We had some unintended consequences with the way they put a hold harmless in here. So we've addressed that concern with an amendment which simply states the average funding for the 5 poorest districts. That's the floor for the state charters. And because of that, we don't need the hold harmless language. I ask you to agree that your charter schools with an attendance zone of districts with lower funding than the statewide average will receive the lesser of the average funding for the districts in the zone or the 5 poorest districts. The House amendment also takes the capital funding for the virtual schools back to 25% from 20%. They wanted us to remove the audit requirement for the virtual schools, but we did not. We held firm on that. And on the needs-based scholarship, we have turned that over to student finance, but we've set the groundwork in the stage so we can now do needs-based funding. There's no work requirement at this point either. And with that, I ask your favorable consideration.
No question. Senators move and the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Bill 787. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 43 and the nays are 7, and the Senate has agreed. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 45th. 45th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 336.
336, read the caption.
SB 336 by Senators Unterman of the 45th and others. A bill we titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 3, Title 35 of the OCGA, relating general provisions relevant to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, was provide that when a subpoena is issued for production of electronic and for other purposes, Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute SB 336, a bill we titled Enactment Chapter 3, Title 35 of the OCGA, relating to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, so as to prevent the disclosure of a subpoena and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 45th speak to her motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, this is the substitute to Senate Bill 336. And as you recall, this is the Internet Crimes Against Children, where the GBI has the ability to go after the person who potentially has pornography, and especially child pornography, on their computers. And that passed out of here, I believe it was unanimous. The House added on a fingerprinting bill, which I agreed to, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. No questions. Thank you. I yield the will.
The Senator has moved. The Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 336. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no, and the Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 17th will stand by. On the passage of the bill, or on the motion, the yeas are 46, the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th.
Mr. President, I move the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 406.
406, read the caption.
Senate Bill 406 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others. A bill will be titled Enactment Title 31 of those G relating to health, so as to enact the Georgia Long-Term Care Background Check Program and to promote public safety and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 406, a bill will be titled Enactment Title 31 of those J relating to health, so as to enact the Georgia Long-Term Care Background Check Program and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 406, we passed this chamber. This is a bill that required the fingerprint background checks for those working in long-term care facilities. The only change is a minor cleanup on the House side on line 405, and this is a section that deals with the immunity for those that are following this procedure as far as being sued for relying on those background checks. We reworded this to make sure it's clear that they're immune from claims that are based on the criminal record of the person they hired. I ask your favorable consideration. Happy to yield for any questions. 32, 33.
No questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator has moved. The Senate agreed. The House substitute to Senate Bill 406. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 321.
Read the captions. 131. Senate Bill 131. 131. Read the caption.
Senate Bill 131 by Senator Tillery, the 19th, and others, a bill be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 11, Title 15 of the OCGA, relating to general provisions for the juvenile code, so as to provide that adoption proceedings be stayed while an appeal of an order to terminate parental rights is pending and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute, SB 131, a bill titled Enactment Chapter 11 of Title 15 of the OCGA, relating to the juvenile code and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, the House agreed to our version of this bill, and it's substantially the same. I'd ask that you please favorably consider it and pass it so we can get along and help the children of Georgia who are in foster care across our state. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I yield the will.
All those in favor on the Senator's motion to agree to the House substitute, vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 51st, which I do not see present in the chamber. If he doesn't arrive, Senator from the 50th will stand by. On the Senator's motion, the yeas are 49 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 51st.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree
to the House substitute to SB 425.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 425 by Senators Gooch of the 51st and others, a bill entitled Enactment, Title 43 of the OCGA relating professions and businesses so as to change provisions relating to professional land surveys or for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute SB 425, the bill entitled Enactment, Title 43 of the OCGA relating professions and businesses so as to change provisions relating to professional land surveyors and for other purposes.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 51st.
Thank you, Mr. President. SB 425 is the bill we did dealing with surveyors and their training requirements and their licensing requirements. Splits out two different licenses if you wanted to do design work for water fixtures like detention ponds and so forth versus just a land surveyor that wanted to do a boundary survey. The House added about 10 hours of continuing education classes for interns to become surveyors. That was the only change, and we encourage you to vote for it.
Senator has moved. All those in favor of his motion will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, like him. Yeas are 50 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 50th.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 330 and that it be taken off the table.
No, it's not on the table. Read the question. We can put it on the table, though, if you keep this up. Read the caption.
Senate Bill 330 by Senator Wilkinson of the 50th and others, a bill will be titled Enactment, Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA, relating to the Quality Basic Education Act and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 330 bill will be titled Enactment, Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA, relating to the Quality Basic Education Act and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 50th. Speak this motion.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Senate Bill 330 passed the Senate and the House unanimously. It sets up pilot programs for agriculture education in elementary schools. It also codifies a 3-component program in secondary schools. The only change that the House made was updating some language from Future Farmers of America to the National FFA organization. I urge your support. Thank you. If there are no questions, I'll yield well.
No questions, Senator. Senators move. Senate agreed. The House Substitutes SB 330. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will like the machine. The yeas are 49 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th again.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 436.
436, read the caption.
Senate Bill 436 by Senator Strickland and 17th and others, a bill will be titled and acted in Chapter 9 and Title 15 of the OCGA relating to probate courts as to change and modernize certain general provisions for probate courts and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 436, a bill will be titled and acted in Chapter 9 and Title 15 of the OCGA relating to probate courts as to change and modernize certain general provisions for probate courts and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 436 came from our probate court judges. We passed this unanimously. It was some cleanup to codify their current practices. The House added a section that will clarify who is an interested party as far as who can actually offer a will to probate. And based on some recent confusion from our appellate courts, to clarify anyone that may have an interest in a will can actually go and file that will. And that's on page 21, section 3 of the bill. Our probate court judges are also in agreement with these changes. Happy to answer any questions.
There are no questions.
Ask for your favorable consideration.
Senators move, Senate agree. The House substitute. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th. 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 321.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 321 by Senator Tiller, the 19th and others, a bill will be titled and acted in Code Section 49.4 of the OCGA relating to civil penalties for false or fraudulent Medicaid claims and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 321, a bill will be titled and acted in Code Section 49.4 of the OCGA relating to civil penalties for false or fraudulent Medicaid claims and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, Senate Bill 321 is the exact same bill we've already passed out of this chamber with a change that allows for a CPI increase, keeps us in the realm of where we're supposed to be for federal guidelines, and allows a 10% surcharge back to us when we find Medicaid fraud in our state. Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
Senate has moved. The Senate agreed. The House substitute to Senate Bill 321. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 45, the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 50th.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 458.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 458 by Senator Wilkinson and the 50th and others. A bill will be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding ad valorem taxation of property so as to provide the conditions upon which family-owned farm entities may elect to discontinue qualifying use and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 458. A bill will be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding ad valorem taxation of property and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 50th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Senate Bill 458 deals with the CUVA covenants. Currently, when you reach the age of 65, your penalty, if you breach the covenant, is reduced. This bill would extend that same reduced penalty to LLCs and partnerships. Also, at the current time, the law does not require, underlying property is excluded from CUVA. Underlying property means the minimum size lot required for residential construction. One of the changes the House made, it makes it clear that the tax assessors cannot require a plat for the underlying property. And if there's a disagreement on the CUVA, if there's an issue, if the Superior Court rules in favor of the taxpayer, currently the taxpayer is forced to pay attorney's fees. If this bill passes, the county will be required to pay those fees if they lose the suit. Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
No questions, Senator. Questions? Senator from the 53rd, what purpose you rise?
Just need to excuse the senator from the 46. He's out of business outside the
Without objection,
chamber.
Senator from the 46 will be excused. Senators moved that the Senate agree to the House substitute. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 46, the nays are 3, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 56th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate agree to the House substitute for Senate Bill 327.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 327 by Senator Alberts, 56 and others, a bill entitled Enactment Article 2 of Chapter 16 of Title 45 of the OCGA relating to death investigations, so as to clarify when a medical examiner's inquiry is required to be conducted and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 327, a bill entitled Enactment Article 2 of Chapter 16 of Title 45 of the OCGA relating to death investigations, so as to clarify when a medical examiner's inquiry is required to be conducted and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
You do have a question, Senator. Well, actually, I guess you better speak to the bill first. Let's do that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 327 is the update from the GBI and Death Investigation Act. We passed this earlier, and this is just a simple cleanup saying when someone's not attended by the physician that they are still able to not need both the medical examiner and the coroner, especially for those that might be in hospice. If there are no questions, I'll yield the will.
You have a question by the Senator from the 37th. No questions. Senator has moved. Senate agree to the House substitute. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 47, the nays are 0. Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 24th.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute for Senate Bill 353.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 353 by Senator Anderson, the 24th and others, a bill entitled Enactment Article 2, Chapter 15, Title 25 of the OCGA relating to regulation of boilers and pressure vessels, so as to establish civil enforcement and penalty authority and the Safety Fire Commissioner, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 353, a bill entitled Enactment Article 2, Chapter 15, Title 25 of the OCGA relating to regulation of boiler and pressure vessels, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 24th to speak to his motion.
Mr. President, this bill's, all we did was change one area that is already at law, and it's so that we make sure that it's correct. Thank you.
That's a record, ladies and gentlemen. That's a record. How was that on your time? 11 seconds? No. He didn't say but 5 words. Are you kidding me? Oh. Senators moved. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. Chair recognizes Senator 25th. What purpose you rise?
Mr. President, I just wanted to let this body know that the senator from the 24th said it will be 10 seconds, and he made it in and out in 10 seconds. So.
Tell you, he knows how to count, too. I'm impressed that he can count to 10. Chair recognizes Senator 24.
Isn't it true that some other senators need to learn how to do it in 10 seconds too?
Well, that would probably speed the process along on these simple agrees. On the motion, the yeas are 45 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute Senate Bill 353. Chair recognizes Senator from the 16th.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 342.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 342 by Senator Hardman, the 16th, and others. The bill will be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 2, Title 40 of the OCGA, relating registration and licensing of motor vehicles, generally so as to permit the owner or operator of a vehicle which has a valid license plate without the required revalidation decal and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 342. A bill will be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 2, Title 40 of the OCGA, relating registration and licensing of motor vehicles, generally and for other purposes.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 16th. Speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a tag bill. All it did was change the definition of the renewal process with an amendment, and that was it. Everything else remains the same. Thank you.
Senators move that we agree. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 2. And the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 404.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 404 by Senator Bass, the 28th, and others. The bill will be titled Enactment Part 5 of Article 3 of Chapter 5 of Title 12 of the OCGA, relating to public water systems, so as to prohibit county, municipal, and other public water systems from charging or assessing a separate fee for standby water service and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute SB 404. A bill will be titled Enactment Part 5 of Article 3 of Chapter 5 of Title 12 of the OCGA, relating to public water systems, so as to prohibit county, municipal, and other public water systems from charging or assessing a separate fee and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator 28.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is Fire Sprinkler Protection System Bill. Tightened up the language in the House. Appreciate your considerable favor.
All those in favor of the Senator's motion will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the senator's motion, the yeas are 39, the nays are 9, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 23rd. 23rd.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 194.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 194 by Senator Stone, 23rd, and others, a bill we titled an Act Chapter 4, Title 18 of the OCGA relating to garnishment proceedings so as to change the maximum part of disposable earnings subject to garnishment and conform the form used therewith. And for other purposes, Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 194, a bill we titled an Act Chapter 4 of Title 18 of the OCGA relating to garnishment proceedings so as to eliminate provisions relating to requiring the clerk of court to approve an affidavit for garnishment. For other purposes, that concludes the order.
Chair recognize Senator from the 23rd present the bill or speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, this is the garnishment bill. 2 technical changes, non-substantive, were made in the House. I'm in full agreement with it. Urge your consideration of SB 194.
No questions,
Yield
Senator.
the will.
Senators move, Senate agree to the House substitute SB 194. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 1st will stand by. On the motion, the yeas are 45 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed. Chair recognizes Senator on the 1st.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House amendment to Senate Bill 397.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 397 by Senator Watson, the first and others, a bill titled Act Amendment Chapter 37, Title 36 of the OCGA, relating to the acquisition and disposition of real and personal property generally so as to allow municipalities to hire state licensed real estate brokers to assist in the sale of real property and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amends SB 397 by replacing lines 1 through 3 with the following to amend Chapter 9, Chapter 37 of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to county property generally and the acquisition and disposition of real and personal property generally and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 1st.
Mr. President, Senate Bill 397, in the House, they just amended it so that counties would be included with the cities when it comes to the real estate agents for which the cities can now use for selling property. If there are no further questions, I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
Man, he was putting me to sleep on that one, I swear. On the senator's motion, the yeas, or all those in favor of the senator's motion will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 20th will stand by. 20th will stand by. No, actually, I'm going to pass you over. Senator from the 13th will stand by. On the senator's motion, the yeas are 44 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed. Chair recognizes Senator from the 13th.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate insist on its substitute to House Bill 605.
Senator is moving that the Senate insist on its substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, the Senate has insisted. Now the chair will recognize Senator from the 20th.
President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 451.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 451 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, the bill will be titled enacted in Code Section 2627 of the OCGA relating to the State Soil and Water Conservation Commission, additional duties and powers so as to remove authority of the State Soil and Water Conservation Commission to formulate certain rules and regulations in consultation with the Environmental Protection Division of the Department of Natural Resources and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute to SB 451, a bill will be titled enacted in Code Section 2627 of the OCGA relating to the State Soil and Water Conservation Commission. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill does three things. It codifies the governor's executive order to move the ag water metering program under the EPD. It established a priority system for installation of meters, and it requires the EPD to contract out the services for this program. I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Senators moved. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 14th will stand by. 14th will stand by. Oh, okay. On the senator's motion, the yeas are 47 and the nays are 2, and Senator's agreed to the House substitute. Yeah. So. Chair recognizes Senator from the 23rd on a motion.
The Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 461.
Read the caption.
SB 461 by Senator Stone, the 23rd, a bill will be titled enactment in Chapter 10, Title 43 of the OCGA relating to barbers and cosmetologists so as to change certain provisions relating to barbering and the occupation of a cosmetologist and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate or the House offers the following substitute to SB 461, a bill will be titled enactment in Chapter 40, Title 31, Chapter 10 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to tattoo studios and barbers and cosmetologists respectively so as to change certain provisions relating to cosmetic and other services and procedures performed in the state. That concludes, and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, Senators. This is the Cosmetology Board bill. The only change they made in the House was to add microblading of the eyebrow, a form of tattooing for cosmetic changes for cancer patients. No.
No question, Senator.
Thank you. Urge your favorable consideration.
All those in favor of the Senator's motion will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 46th, you will be next. On the motion, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 0, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Bill 441.
Read the caption.
House Bill 441 by President Fleming on the 21st and others, a bill will be titled enactment in Chapter 12, Title 53 of the OCGA relating to trust so as to establish qualified self-settled spendthrift trust and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate offers. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate substitute to HB 441 by replacing lines 181 through 183 with the following. beneficiary, or 5 judgments for necessaries. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from 46. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the bill that dealt with trusts. There was a small change to it from the House that made it be more consistent with other areas of trust law. They removed an amendment that we had to the bill. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
No questions, Senator. All those in favor of the Senator's motion vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 43 and the nays are 6, and the Senate has agreed to the House amendment to the Senate substitute. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 56th, who is speaking to the 57th.
Thank you, Mr. President. So true. I move the Senate adhere to the disagreement to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Bill 93 and that a conference committee be appointed.
Read the caption.
House Bill 93 by Representative Corbett, the 174th and others, the bill will be titled enactment Code Section 48235.1 of those J relating to refunds of sales and use taxes, so to provide that no interest shall be paid on refunds of sales and use taxes to a purchaser that held a certificate or exemption letter for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate substitute to HB 93 by the lines 1 through 17, inserting in lieu thereof the following to amend Title 48 of the CGA relating to revenue taxation, so expand exemption from state and sales use tax for certain computer equipment sold or leased to commercial banks, Mr. President, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
You've read the caption. Senator has moved for the Senate to adhere to his disagreement to the House amendment and the Senate substitute, and a conference committee be appointed. Is there objection? Without objection, the conferees will consist of the very capable senator of the 56th, the very capable senator of the 52nd, and the more often than not capable senator of the 30th. Chair recognizes Senator from the 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 339.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 339 by Senator Ligon III and others. The bill will be titled enactment amend Article 2, Chapter 3, Title 20 of the OCGA relating to Board of Regents and University systems, so as to provide for the establishment of free speech policies for institutions of the university system and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers following subject SB 339. The bill will be titled enactment amend Article 2, Chapter 3, Title 20 of the OCGA relating to Board of Regents and University systems, so as to require the Board of Regents to develop policy providing for free speech or free press and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 3rd. Senator from the 41st, you stand by. I'll let you be next.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is our campus free speech bill. The House changed the penalty requirements, and it asked the regents to establish those. Did not address the free speech zones, and it removed any of the provisions in the bill about freedom of association. Unless there are any questions, I yield the well.
No questions, Senator. Senator's moved. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. call for the vote? All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. That's all right. On the bill, the yeas are on the motion. The yeas are 35, the nays are 17, and the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 331.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 331 by Senator Henson, the 41st and others. The bill will be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 27, Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding the Georgia Lottery for Education Act so as to allow a winner of a lottery prize to remain anonymous under certain conditions or for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following substitute SB 331. The bill will be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 27, Title 50 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding the Georgia Lottery for Education Act so as to allow a winner of a lottery prize to remain anonymous and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, basically what happened was we amended the bill on the floor. Legislative Council looked at that when it went to the House. They thought the exact same meaning could be written a little better. So the amendment, Senator from the 37th and another one that was on the bill incorporated, making it over $250,000. If you win in the Georgia Lottery, your name can be confidential if you sign a written request to have it. So it's really the intent. It's just the same as we passed in the Senate. I urge your adoption of this important bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All those in favor of the Senator's motion will vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 40th will stand by. 40th. On the motion, the yeas are 50 and the nays are 4. Senators agreed to the House substitute. Secretary will read Chair recognizes Senator from the 40th.
Mr. President, I move the Senate agree to the House substitute to SR 745.
Read the caption.
Senate Resolution 745 by Senator Mill of the 40th and others. The resolution recognizing Robert H. Bob Bell and dedicating interchanges as honor and for other purposes. Mr. President, House substitute to Senate Resolution 745, a resolution dedicating certain portions of the state highway system, repealing a portion of a resolution dedicating certain portions of the state highway system and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 40th.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the annual road naming bill and I ask for your favorable consideration.
All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 49 and 50. 50 went as high as 50. And the nays are 0. And the Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 18th. 18th. You recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the House substitute to SB 427.
Read the caption.
Senate Bill 427 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others, a bill to be signed and act amend Code Section 19615 of the OCGA relating to child support and final verdict or decree guidelines for determining amount of award and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House substitute to SB 427, the bill to be signed and act amend Code Section 19615 of the OCGA relating to child support and final verdict or decree guidelines for determining amount of award, continuation of duty to provide support and duration of support and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Is that true? Senator from the 18th, did you didn't present, did you? Let's stop the vote. Stop the vote. My mistake. Chair recognizes Senator from the 18th to present the bill.
I was fine the way you did it, President. Good evening, colleagues. Y'all remember the bill that came before us for 427, which was a modification of child support guidelines. The purpose was to modify the guidelines in Georgia so that they would be consistent with federal regulations. If we don't do it by July of this year, there's a risk that the state loses certain TANF funds and other grant money. So, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. Let me start over. This is 427, which is a department. No, all right. Anyway, so what was added to it by the House was changing in the procedure for some child support worksheets.
Yeah, all those in favor vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary unlock the machine.
They couldn't hear me. Thank you. I yield the well.
Unlock the machine. I'm gonna quiet it down. We've got a good bit of noise going on in the chamber, in particular in the back. Let's keep the doors closed and as many conversations that can go on outside the chamber would be helpful. Members can't hear. Senator from the 19th, stand by. You'll be next. the first ladies of the 30th district and the 49th districts blowing kisses at the center from the 49th. But welcome to the Senate chamber. Let's give them a round of applause. On the motion, the yeas are 47, the nays are 0, and Senate has agreed to the House substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute, the House Bill 904.
Read the caption.
House Bill 904 by Representative Hanson, the 80th, and others, a bill entitled Act Amendment Code Section 51.325 of the OCGA relating to certain liability not limited so as to clarify provisions relating to the effect of an owner of land charging an admission price or fee and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate substitute to HB 904 by replacing lines 9 through 12 with the following. 2, on a date when the owner of land charges any individual who lawfully enters such land for recreational use and any individual is injured in connection with the recreational use for which the charge was made and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 904 is substantially the same as Senate Bill 321 that we passed, 431 that we passed earlier in this session. There was some language added into House Bill 904 to make further protect our ag community, make sure that they felt comfortable with the bill. If there are no questions, Mr. President, I'll yield the will. Can I get a
No
copy of the
questions.
bill?
All those in favor? Well, there. All right. No questions. No questions. State your inquiry, Senator from the 31st.
Mr. President, has this bill been printed and placed on the desk?
Has it been printed and placed on the desk? Should be the very last one in the book, is what he said. Give you a moment to look at it. I'd like to welcome former Senator Mike Pollock back there in the back. Good to have you back visiting with us tonight. Connie Stokes, former senator, was here earlier as well, so a lot of great visitors today. Senator, have you found the bill? All right, you good? Okay. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 20th. Senator from the 20th, I'm going to let you stand by next, please, sir. On the motion, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 2, and the Senate has agreed to the House amendment to the Senate substitute. Chair recognizes Senator from the 20th.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Bill 792.
Read the caption.
House Bill 792 by Reverend Roger the 10th and others, a bill we title an act amendment Chapter 8 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to waste management so as to extend the sunset date for certain solid waste surcharges and hazardous waste fees and for other purposes. Mr. President, the House offers the following amendment. Amend the substitute at HB 792 by inserting after waste on line 4 the following. Inert waste and coal ash to change the use of such surcharge funds to provide effective dates for such surcharges and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill extends the sunset on the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund by a year and also requires additional fee to be paid to the host municipality on private landfills. It's been agreed to. A lot of work on it. It's a good bill. Thank you.
You spoke to the bill. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Let me have the Senate's attention for just a moment, if I might. The Democrat caucus needs to have about 5 or so minutes. We're going to take a 10-minute recess after this bill. On the motion, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 4, and the Senate has agreed to the House amendment to the Senate substitute. They're going to be meeting in the President Pro Tem's conference room. 10-minute recess.